Defying concerns of an economic slowdown, millions of people in China welcomed the Lunar New Year by hitting the stores and spending more than they did last year. China's retailers earned more than $148 billion over the week-long holiday. That's an 8.5% increase. This year, more imported goods have also made it into shopping baskets. That came along with international trade fairs like the China-Europe Freight Train New Year Festival. More than $3 million was spent on about 800 products, including Polish fruit juices, French wines, Dutch cookies, and Belgian chocolates. While trade is thriving between Europe and China, trade with the US has been marred by tariffs and threats of more barriers. Beijing has agreed to buy more US products and cooperate on issues like intellectual property. But Washington has pledged to push for more concessions.
And I want to say all the issues are on the table. You know, your structural, so-called structural technology, transfers, IP theft, cyber hacking, enforcement is really, really, really important. That's one of the things Ambassador Lighthizer has emphasized and taught all of us. And they're going to go and we'll see what happens. The March 1st deadline is still intact.
If they don't reach a deal by then, $200 billion worth of Chinese goods will be subjected to a higher US tariff of 25%.
For us, like the rest of the world, of course we hope to see good results from the trade discussion.
Investors are also banking on the world's biggest economies to reach a truce. But most seem to be steering clear of being too optimistic about the outcome. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
Well, let's get more on the trade talks now with Matt Maley from Newton, Massachusetts. He's the Managing Director and Equity Strategist at the trading firm Miller Tabak. Welcome back to the program, Matt. So we are getting to the pointy end of these trade talks. Up until now, they've been relatively mid-level meetings, but we are expecting US Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in Beijing later this week. Could this be a sign that perhaps a breakthrough could happen?
Well, yes and no. And I hate to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but my concern is that on the positive side, well, we have some good stuff going on. I do think we'll get some sort of an agreement and also something, or at the very least, that pushes the increased tariffs up to 25%, pushes that down the road. There's no question in my mind that the Chinese don't want that. Their economy is obviously weakening and shows continued weakness. And I think the president has shown that he's very, very sensitive to what goes on in the stock market. And I think a meltdown in these talks will be very bad for the stock market. He wants to avoid that at all in any way he can. The one thing, though, that concerns me is that they don't seem to be getting very close on either intellectual property or market access. And those are the types of things that I think will be pushed further down the road. It's going to be a long time before those are rectified. And when you listen to some of the economic experts, they really say, hey, the Chinese really have to give in on more on this because look at their economy. But then you listen to the geopolitical experts, the ones who really know China, and they say they are a long way from doing anything like that. And they can take a little bit more pain than I think a lot of U.S. economists think. So I guess my point is I think we'll get some sort of an agreement or a framework for an agreement, but the rest of it will be pushed down the road. So I think that, yeah, we could get a little bit boost in the markets when that happens, but it may be short-lived because the real concrete, more important issues won't be settled, and we'll still have this overhang that's going to be with us, I think, for many months. Interesting.
We heard there in Laila's story, Larry Kudlow talk about enforcement being a big issue. I mean, how significant an issue is this in these negotiations, do you think?
Well, it's very important because one of the things we've seen over the years, I mean, over the decades, that is that, China has come in, they've been willing to agree to buy more of our products, and they've kind of pushed everything, kind of pushed to the side. Nobody else really pays attention to very, very much. And one of the biggest problems with that is that we haven't been able to enforce it or get kind of confirmation that they are being the agreements are being held. And so I think this time the U.S. side wants very much to get something more concrete than they've got in the past, so they can verify that anything that's agreed upon is indeed taking place.
We saw hopes of a breakthrough fade when Donald Trump announced recently that he wasn't going to meet with President Xi Jinping before the March 1st deadline. Is this a deal breaker that many people are fearing?
I don't think so. As long as they get some sort of agreement, or at least framework for an agreement, that kind of meeting it can be pushed off. It doesn't have to be before March 1st. The one thing I think really when they kind of announced that it would take place, there was a little bit more optimism that we could get an agreement. Now that that's been pushed off, I think it does hurt the situation a little bit. But again, they can have when we get an agreement, they'll have a meeting, and I don't think that's going to. The fact it's been pushed off by a couple of weeks is not that big a deal. The key is will they get a real more concrete, long-lasting agreement? And I think that's going to be many months off. I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Interesting. We'll be keeping a close eye on these talks this week. Matt Maley in Massachusetts, thank you as always.